Thanks, Skip. We really appreciate the Clinton School for Public Service and the Clinton Library for hosting tonight, and the Little Rock Film Festival, who's also partnered with us in these events. This is the third time that the Arkansas Times and the Clinton School for Public Service have collaborated to host an event based on reporting done by the Arkansas Times. We strongly believe in interacting with our readers, and we appreciate the Clinton School for supporting that vision. Tonight's program is about capturing courtroom trials on video. Most trials in Arkansas and elsewhere are not recorded. Tonight, our panelists will make the case for why all trials should be recorded. Mara Leverett, who wrote the cover story case for Cameras in Court for the Arkansas Times, for which tonight's event is based, is a contributing editor to the Arkansas Times and the author of the books The Boys on the Tracks and Devil's Knot, the latter of which will be adapted, or has been adapted, and will be released next year as a feature film adaptation starring Reese Witherspoon and Colin Firth. After spending 18 years in a prison for a crime he did not commit, Jason Baldwin was released last year after submitting an offered plea where he entered a guilty plea while maintaining his innocence. Since his release, Jason and his girlfriend Holly Ballard, who's with us tonight, have been traveling the country advocating on behalf of those in prison for crimes they didn't commit. Today, Jason and longtime supporter John Harden announced the formation of a nonprofit, Proclaim Justice, which is dedicated to that mission. Jason and Holly live in Seattle, where Jason attends community college. He's considering law school. So thanks. I'm gonna move over here, and we're gonna have a brief question and answer session, and then we'll have plenty of time for you all to ask questions. So last night, for those of you who weren't there, we showed Paradise Lost at the Argenta Community Theater. For those who haven't seen the film, perhaps the most striking thing about it is the accent the filmmakers, Joe Berlinger and Bruce Sinofsky, were able to get. Basically, all parties involved in the film contribute. The victims, your families, Damien and Jesse's families. Even more striking is that the filmmakers were able to film in the courtroom. And so we see these two amazing trials unfold. What effect do you think the film, and particularly the courtroom footage, had on your case?
I think it had a great effect. Had it not been for Joe and Bruce down there filming Paradise Lost, filming the trials and everything, no one would have known of the terrible injustice that occurred. We would have just been forgotten, swept up under the rug. Damien would have been executed, and Jesse and I would have just been, left there to grow old and, pass away and find ourselves in the prison cemetery, So it just energized and focused everybody. Everybody who saw it recognized it for what it was, the injustice, and everybody's hearts, were moved to help and bring about the saving of Damien and Jesse and I being free to, be with our families and loved ones today.
Mara, as you've pointed out before, this was an exception to the rule. This filming in a courtroom in Arkansas, Arkansas and elsewhere, as we've said, rarely allows for this kind of access. How come?
Historically, courts have been very reluctant. In the old days, going back to the Lindbergh trial, there were attempts to get cameras in courts and a lot of problems associated with them. The Oj Simpson trial, a lot of people thought that Judge Ito didn't maybe behave as well as he should have, and there have been setbacks to the point that a lot of very good judges in particular have felt that the cameras were a detriment to the achievement of justice in trials. So that as a result, in the federal system, there are no cameras, no federal trial. The Timothy McVeigh trial, for instance, would have been very interesting to have seen, but nothing is recorded at the federal level. States, it's a patchwork by state, court by court within that, and that's true in Arkansas. And so it was remarkable, extraordinary, almost miraculous that this particular trial got filmed, these two trials. What had to happen? First of all, it had to be such a sensational case, 3 8-year-old children murdered. Second, the alleged motive, satanic killing by teenagers, was sensational enough to attract a cable television network's attention. And then 2 really fine, dedicated documentary filmmakers flown in from New York, who then embedded themselves in the West Memphis area for almost 6 months between the time of the murders and the trials, working to try to get access. And what access did they need to get? As you said, Lindsay, they had to get not just approval from the judge, they had to get approval from the prosecuting attorneys, from the defense attorneys, from the families of the victims, from the families of the defendants. An impossible hurdle to overcome. People were paid money for, if not explicitly, implicitly, for the privilege of getting these cameras into the courtroom. And so it was accomplished by the dedication of these filmmakers. Can anyone think of any other trial in Arkansas where that's happened? It doesn't. And yet we are at a point where we have more people in prison than we have ever had before, and we have less media coverage of trials than we have ever had before. Newspapers are cutting back on court coverage. All media are cutting back. My contention is that we should not have to rely on media interest in a sensational trial for that 1 in a zillion trial that might end up being covered. All trials should be covered. We've got easy technology now. We could easily online it. In fact, the Arkansas Supreme Court recently, in this case, this very case, began to, for the first time, online streaming of oral arguments before that court. We could do this for every court, every trial, and have a record. And I'll just say, right here are the discs containing the videos of the entire 2 trials of the West Memphis 3. It's this simple. It could be available from a court reporter. It could be available online. We should be, and we should not be expecting it to have to go through a medium of television, newspaper, somebody fighting that. The courts should like to have.
To be clear, you mentioned that payments were made not to the prosecutors or the judges involved in the case. Can you talk about
absolutely
how they got on board, what sort of hurdle, or what the process was, how it worked?
Well, I will say that the defense attorneys were paid and the premise was that they were going to be given some money to help with investigations and so forth of the case. So it's a murky process. It was, and the other part of it was that just yet another fluke. The judge at one point was having a conference with some of the security for the courtroom prior to the trials and said, you know, we got a real big problem with the audio in this courtroom, and we're going to have a lot of people crammed in. And that's when the HBO guy said, oh, we can help you with that. And so that little piece of miracle too. Point is, we shouldn't have to, we have got how many other people who are innocent in prison? This record should be available for everybody. It should just be available, and it's not that hard.
Jason, can you talk about the first time that you saw the film?
Yeah, the first time I saw the film, I was at the Barner unit. It was right after it came out on VHS in '96. I was woken up by a friend of mine that I'd made friends with at the prison at like 2:30 in the morning. You know, I had to be at work at like 7, you know, in the kitchen at that time, you know. So I'm like, you know, what are you waking me up for, you know? And this guy doesn't even live in the same barracks where I'm at, you know. But he had a job that, you know, gave him liberties in the prison and everything. And he was like, do you trust me? I'm like, yeah, you know. He's like, well, get up and get dressed. Come on, you know. And honestly, the first thing that crossed my mind, I'm like, oh, please do not let this be some type of escape thing going on, you know, because I do not want to deal with it. And, you know, I don't want to get shot or anything. But he was like, you know, you trust me? And I'm like, yeah. So I got up and got dressed, and we went to the visitation area in the prison, and there was one of those rolling carts with a TV on it and a VHS recorder. And he was like, you drink Mountain Dew? I'm like, yeah. He goes, you want a burrito? I'm like, yeah. And, you know, we get all that taken care of. And he already had the tape in the VCR, so I didn't see what it was, you know. So that was kind of a mystery. And I'm the type of guy where, you know, I don't ask a lot of questions a lot of the time. So I'm just like, I'm going to see how this folds out. You know, it's 2:30 in the morning, a movie. That's pretty cool, but I still have work coming up, you know. This has got to be a really good movie. And surprise to me, it started up, and there it was, Paradise Lost. And honestly, for me, it's very difficult to watch, you know, to see my family, to see the victims' families and everybody going through such a horrible, painful time and everything. And then to see myself, you know, not even realizing what's going to happen to me, you know, just thinking everything's going to come out okay, that, you know, everything will, you know, come out in the trial, and, you know, we'll be released and go home and everything, and life will go back to normal. But I remember the guy, my friend there, after we watched it, he jumped up and punched me in the shoulder. He was like, JB, you're going home. And I'm like, yeah, you know. And many, many years later, here I am, you know. But I just thank God every day for those films, for Joe and Bruce, you know, filming the trial so everybody could see what happened. And as painful it is to watch, I recognize how necessary it was.
Interestingly, Joe and Bruce came down, we discussed this a little bit last night, they came down initially thinking they were going to make a movie about rotten teenagers who, you know, done this ritual satanic killing, and as they got involved in the film, they realized that wasn't the case. Can you talk about the evolution, not just from that to we have a different story, but from that to advocacy filmmaking? And both of you can speak on this.
Well, at the time, I didn't really get to know Joe and Bruce that well during the filming of the trial because, like you said, at first they believed we were guilty. They believed that, you know, what they were down there filming was, as Joe says, a real-life River's Edge in relation to that movie. And so he kind of kept a distance, a professional distance from me. But he'll tell you now that during that time, after he gained access to Damien and Jesse and myself, that he came to believe in our innocence as he was seeing the trials unfold and the investigations unfold. And he was thinking, you know, surely, you know, at the end of this trial, these guys will go home. And at the end of it, at the end of both trials, when we didn't, he and Joe and Bruce made a promise to one another, well, to us, even though we weren't present to hear the promise, that they would not give up until we were freed. And they did just that and held true to their word. And I mean, they're two heroes. Mara's a true hero. There are so many heroes. And
so one of the points that Mara makes in her article on making the case for cameras in court is, you know, that just we don't have enough of a sense of how justice system works. It's not as if most of us can take off from work and go hang out in a courtroom, even though it's a public space. We're allowed to, but logistically it doesn't really work out for many of us. I wonder if you can talk about as a 16-year-old, what your kind of notion of the judicial system was and how that changed as you it.
Yeah, I remember the night. Anybody in America, if you should find yourself for something, TV show order or whatever, you can pretty much expect three things to happen: a mugshot, fingerprinting, and a call home. You know, or a phone call. Well, I didn't get the phone call for several weeks. My mom didn't know for a long time. The mugshot happened, true as, you know, it normally happens in any case. And then the fingerprinting, they didn't just take my fingerprints, they took my whole handprints and my footprints, hair, blood, and saliva. And I had two thoughts on that, two reasons. I was thinking, they always do this and they just don't let people know because they don't want criminals and things like that to know this is what they're going to be doing, so that, you know, the criminals can't, you know, protect themselves from that or whatever. Or two, they actually had footprints or, you know, blood, saliva, something. So for me, I thought I latched onto that as like the saving grace, because, you know, the night of my arrest, the detectives and things are talking to me, asking me questions, and I'm being honest and straightforward and telling them where I was at, what I was doing, but it just was not what they wanted to hear. And so for me, I was thinking, okay, when they test this, then they'll realize I was telling them the truth. They don't believe me now because everything says, you know, and then several months later, they came and took the evidence again, you know, the hair, blood, saliva. To prove my evidence. It's the whole. And, you know, years later, finally, the stuff was tested.
And then later, after you watched the movie and your friend said, hey, you're going home, did you think that you were going to go home? And as the appeals process, I guess, when did you become jaded?
I never became jaded. Still not jaded, even not exonerated. I just thank God every day. The appeals process, after I saw the first film, I didn't have attorneys currently working on the case. Nobody was, you know, working on the case. After the films came out, I'd already met with Kathy Baldwin. If there's something I can do, you know, and kind of make it organized, you know. So that was a good hope. And from my family, my friends, you know, everybody who knew me, there was always support and love. And there was, you know, just my faith in God and everything. There was always that. And just my spirit was just always soaring, even though my body and it was going through such traumatic and hard times. But I was never really thinking about myself. I was thinking about my mom and my brothers. How can I, you know, do my very best to not make them worry any more than what they are, you know. So there was no room for being jaded.
And did the films, you know, as they continued to come out and the publicity increased, did that change the way you were treated in prison, both good and bad?
When I first got to prison, it was like they were all just waiting on me because they had seen the trial coverage and footage and, you know, things like that. And it was, you know, I've got broken bones and stuff, but I don't want to really get into all that. It was rough for, you know, a while. But they finally started believing me, and then the films reinforced. You know, the day I got there, it was all curses and wish you were dead and, you know, beatings and spittings and all that stuff. But when I left, it was hugs and tears of joy and people saying, you know, my prayers were answered, you know. And they were even like consoling me, you know, like, you did the right thing, just go be free, go live your life, you know, in reference to the Alford plea. So.
Yeah, well, can you talk a little bit about the Alford plea? I think that's something that a lot of people are interested in. You know, initially it was framed as you were the reliable one.
I didn't want to stay. That's a moment, a single minute, you know. But at the same time, I was willing to do that, to, you know, pursue the right path and be completely exonerated. The state could have gave us, you know, a different choice. You know, they could have looked at the evidence and said, you know what, there's no evidence to support your conviction. We believe your innocence, dropping charges, setting you free, and we're going to
I mentioned in the intro, you're going.
there's things happen for a reason. I believe that, but I also believe you can choose the reason. I've been through a lot in life, and I definitely don't want to see anyone else go through what I went through, what Damien went through, what Jesse went through. And I practically just dedicate my life to justice and to, you know, preventing innocent people from going to prison and to rescuing those innocent people who are currently in prison. And while I was in prison, you know, I grew up there, and I met a lot of people who were actually guilty of their crimes, but I believe deserve a second chance. So that's another thing I believe in. And I would also believe that the death penalty is wrong. If for no other reason, then you can really end up killing a person who is innocent, as what almost happened to Damien. And really almost happened to me because they were trying to give me the death penalty. And so now that I'm free, I'm blessed with a scholarship, going to college. Hopefully, as you mentioned, I can go to law school if I'm, you know, my grades are good enough and whatnot, and you know, work on these things. You mentioned the foundation that John and I founded today, Proclaim Justice, and you know, this is what my life is about, and I'm willing to spend, you know, my entire life doing this.
Mara, I didn't mention in the intro, but you're at work at a sequel to Devil's Knot. The media coverage, publicity surrounding the case.
We've taken it on the chin because so much more transparency in our courts, so that we the people can know what we the people are doing to other people in our courts. But as a result of this particular case and the way it's turned out, there have been the 3 HBO documentaries that are all out now and have been viewed countless times and will be continued to show around the world. On Christmas Day, the Jacksons film West of Memphis is going to be released internationally. which is also a documentary about this case. And then next year, as you mentioned, the feature film of my book, Devil's Knot, will be coming out. I think it's going to be wham, wham, wham to the state of Arkansas, and we don't need it. And my sense is that there are two things we can do. The first thing that ought to be done very fast is we ought to exonerate these guys. We ought to be demanding of our governor that this happen, that these men be exonerated, and that the state put its resources into a sincere investigation of who actually did kill those children. Thank you. And then I think in a more forward-looking way, this is an opportunity for us to take the lead nationally and say, let's do something, let's learn something from this, and let's show the nation that we have learned something from this, and let's take the real progressive step of saying, not just we're going to wallow around in the debate about who's going to get a camera into the courtroom and under what conditions and so forth and so on, but say, no, we want our courts to do the recording. Put the cameras in, just as the Arkansas Supreme Court has for its own courts. Here, do it for every court and get it done, get it available, and show the nation that we don't need to spend the next 10 years dealing with questions that really should have been settled 25 years ago. We can take a lead on this. So if I think we have both an obligation on one hand with regard to exoneration, and we have a great opportunity. And the alternative is we just keep on staying way behind the curve and getting beat up by this. So my suggestion is we all tell every public official we know that this is what we expect, and
I know we're always being told, watch your money, this fiscal cliff, you hear about all this government funding. Where can we find those funds at? How do we advocate getting those funds? And then if I can ask Jason if you'll answer that one.
My answer on the financial question is that how many of you have a camera on you right now? I don't think technology has answered this largely for that could be installed, and there are delicacies about the courtroom. For instance, in Massachusetts right now, a lot of issues. For instance, a question about if a gang member wants to get up and testify against another gang member and doesn't want to be shot when he leaves the courtroom, how do you protect him? And so they are working out systems where the judge has the on and off switch, can keep the audio going, stop the video, distort the voice, all these kinds of things. We've got great technology, and it's not expensive. And I say, weighing it against the cost of keeping Jason Baldwin alone in prison for 18 years unnecessarily, that alone could probably equip every courtroom in the state, and is more than worth it. Jason, on the Alford plea.
Yes, Son of Sam law, great, put forth for the purpose of crimes cannot profit of those crimes. Damien and Jesse and myself have committed no crime, so therefore we can't profit off the crime. With the films, the Devil's Night and everything, we're just sharing what happened in our lives. We're just, you know, sharing with everybody and the viewers what's gone on with our lives, what we've been through, not a crime that we've committed, because we have not committed any crime.
One of the fundamental problems about an hour were recorded. Those were partly because of that. A group of people, some of whom are here tonight, got together and asked, tried to find out what is the status of recording police interrogations in Arkansas. And in the process, we learned what was being done in all different states about this, and there is quite a movement, quite a huge movement, and where it's been done, once after the police get over their initial resistance, typically, they love it. They love it because it is very effective in courtrooms to show the conditions under which the statement was made, and that police to and presented a lot of information to the court. They do something. Last July, the Arkansas Supreme Court bring in somebody for questioning. It has to be recorded from beginning, electronically recorded. We had been hoping for video. We wanted them to say video recorded. Instead, they made it electronically recorded, so it can just be audio. To be electronically recorded from beginning to end if it is going to be presented at trial. And if they want to present a statement that police took at trial that wasn't recorded, then step forward from the
if you are not vote. So I'm definitely not incarcerated anymore. So Holly is amazing, and she helped me through the whole process. And I got my ballot and everything that was on it, and pulled everything up online and researched every little thing on there, and cast my vote and let my voice be heard.
And I'll try to say something about the exoneration process, and you may know more. Understanding it is business. He is the one who can do it, not asking for a pardon, because there's nothing to be pardoned. There was no crime to be pardoned, but to say that we do not believe that these guys are guilty, and I think it's entirely in the governor's hands. Is that your understanding, Jason?
Yeah, that's true, because we took the Alford plea and waived all of our rights to our current appeals and everything. However, Scott Ellington, has said that he was open to any evidence that we find, and we've been bringing evidence and things to him. There's a lot of things we haven't got tested yet that we've been trying to get tested for years now, and we're working on that and everything. But you're totally right. The governor can,
And Scott Ellington is the prosecuting attorney in the district where you were convicted.
Correct.
And he said at another one of these events last year that right after the release, that if the attorneys for these guys who are continuing to pursue investigations in the case, if they can present to him evidence that he, Mr. Ellington, finds persuasive, he will investigate. So far, despite evidence having been brought to him, he apparently hasn't found it persuasive enough to move forward on it.
I don't know what I'm looking for and what would be persuasive enough. But, I mean, I had a mullet back then. I shed like a cat. Had I been there, my hairs would have been everywhere. And because of that alone,
those witnesses, if those expert witnesses knew that their colleagues could see what they're saying, I think there may be an added emphasis on being accurate.
Love that point.
Back in the back.
Hi, Mr. Baldwin. I had a question about your relationship with Mr. Eccles and Mr. Mistelli. Now that your names have become associated with this really incredible story, I mean, you've reached an almost like quasi-celebrity status. I'm curious how that has affected your personal relationship with Mr. Eccles, particularly as well as Mr. Mistelli.
I'm not sure if it's the celebrity status or whatever that's going, anyway, Damien, he's trying to, get past being in prison. He's trying to get past, being one of the West Memphis Three and everything. He's trying to put all that behind him and move on with his life. And Jesse, I mean, honestly, I'm worried for the guy. He's still living here in Arkansas, living in West Memphis, and he's having difficult times financially, with work, with family. His father is in poor health and everything, and I just worry for him all the time. As far as relationship goes, we don't communicate much, honestly. I had a number for Jesse for a while, and I'd text him, send him photos, I'm like, hey, this is what I'm doing now, how are you, and things like that. And then, his number was disconnected, for various reasons and stuff, and I hear he's got another phone number. Somebody, if they've got it, I'd love to have it. And Damien, I send him texts and the same, emails and stuff. I been to New York a couple of times, and when he was staying there, I stopped by and visited him, with Holly and his wife Lori and stuff. But he's just trying to move on past all this, I think. But there was a time when he was very upset about my involvement with Mara and the screenplay of Devil's Knot, because initially he said it was too painful of a script, that the script was not accurate and things like that, as far as when it concerned him. And me being me, my first thing was, okay, have you talked to the people who have the script, like Mara or Elizabeth Fowler, who is part of the production team and everything, who was over it and everything. And he had it, he's just like, I don't like it, but I'm more of a type person. Okay, if you don't like something, well, do something to make it to where you like it, or to where it's more accurate and everything. And Elizabeth and Mara and everybody involved with the project is totally open. In fact, want feedback from anyone and everyone involved who knows about the story to make it factually accurate, And I found Elizabeth and definitely Mara to be totally open. There was just a few things, and we went through the script, several times to make sure, things were accurate and, portrayed everybody involved accurately. And he still doesn't like it. And in fact, he sent me a text, before I even agreed to work on it, when I was just, trying to make sure it was factually accurate and everything, saying he would no longer speak to me or have a public appearance with me and things like that. And, but, I later on, I just, people would ask me, the same question, what our communication was, and I never hit onto it and said that we weren't talking anything, because, I just hoped that he would open back up and realize, that there was nothing wrong with the film being made. It wasn't painting him in a light that wasn't true or accurate, and it wasn't designed to hurt him or anything like that. But finally, someone, people kept asking questions, and his book came out, and he mentioned it in there and everything, so I had to, mention it, and on my Facebook had to put out a public statement about it and stuff. And then he finally started texting me back again and things like that. But I mean, I love him. I love Jesse and all of our families and things. And I wish him the best. And I just, I see him, and he's always talking about how hurt and how painful and things are. I just hope he can, heal and get past it.
I like to say, I've known these guys for almost since their convictions. And I'd like you all to think back to any two people you knew in high school, and how many of them you're still best buds with. And these three were artificially thrown together, and they became the West Memphis Three thanks to the state of Arkansas. There was absolutely nothing other than the trials that would dictate that they wouldn't have gone three entirely separate ways anyway. And it makes perfect sense that they have different guys and different lives. That's the way it should be.
Other questions?
Good evening. Last night, a young man was questioning you about why hasn't anything been done to go after the prosecutors, the sheriff, or the police officials who raised such a fuss and mishandled the investigation. Well, that's usually covered under a little something called good faith immunity. I'd like to ask all three of you, putting cameras in the courtroom, how will that affect, how will that change, if at all, good faith immunity, and make everybody involved more accountable to the public?
May I grab that one? The way I see it is that we need transparency first. You get the transparency, then you get the accountability. Nobody would know what happened in this case if it were not for
the films. Nobody, they happened, the trials happened, and like 99.99% of the trials that happen day in and day out in Arkansas and everywhere else in the country, they vanish except for some musty transcript if one is ever actually written. And so we need, in order to have accountability, we first have to see. We also, once we can see, once we can find out online in particular, how our courtrooms are being run, then we can go to the polls and we can become more informed voters. We can actually know how this prosecutor behaves in court, how that judge behaves in court, and what we're going to do when we cast our vote. Right now, what do we know about the candidates for judicial office? We are ignorant about these very crucial positions. So transparency, and then at least we can hold them accountable in court. And then ultimately, I think there has got to be a system, as already exists in Texas of all places, and in other states, where if someone like Jason, Damien, Jesse is taken away from their lives for 18 years and suffers in prison for that long, that there is a policy that dictates that they can be paid, at least in money, for what happened, what was taken from them. Right now, there is nothing. There is nothing that for them to be paid back for what was taken by the state from their lives. And I think that once there's a price tag on getting somebody like him in prison for a long time and losing that much of his life, I think all of a sudden we're going to see a lot more accountability in the courtrooms.
You pretty much covered it all, right?
We have time for one more question. Back. Sorry.
Christopher Peeler sends you his regards. He still considers himself a friend of yours. And when he went to court, William C. MacArthur was drunk on bourbon whiskey. The 3 witnesses against him all tested positive for illegal drugs, and that doesn't show up on the transcript. And I was charged with the same murder that he was charged with. And when I went to court, I used my get out of jail free card and my friendship with the violent, my affiliation with the Violent Crime Task Force, and my friendship with Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton sent 2 Secret Service agents to my court trial, which you were not invited to, and they had the charges against me dismissed. And thank you for your concern, Mara. And Baldwin, God bless you.
He's one of the greatest artists I've ever seen. I think we're going to do some things for him too.
Let me thank Mara, Jason, Lindsay for a great program. And pleased to Jason's interest in the law. We heard him talking a little bit about it. Tomorrow at noon here in the Clinton Library, he will speak to the Pulaski County Bar Association. Thank you all for coming. Have a safe trip home, and thank you all very, very much.
Thank you, Steve.